The seed, the ancient power sitting in your core like an uncut diamond, raw, unrefined, and waiting for a man worthy enough to shape it. This isn't some poetic metaphor. This is biological, psychological, spiritual. Napoleon Hill didn't call sexual energy the strongest human force because it sounded good. He called it that because he studied men who bent history to their will, men who built empires, shifted industries, and commanded loyalty like kings. And he found a common thread running beneath their achievements. They learned to control and redirect their sexual force instead of being controlled by it. Sexual energy is not just the urge to mate, it's the primal life force, the same energy that sparks life in the womb, drives men to conquer, and fuels creativity that changes the world. It's pressure, electricity, a concentrated charge in the nervous system and mind. Most men feel it, but never master it. They let it leak out in moments of weakness, chasing instant gratification like moths flinging themselves into flames. They don't realize they're throwing away the very thing that could have built their throne. Every time you release without purpose, you're diffusing a surge of focus, drive, and power that, if held and forged, could have pushed you to execute ideas, dominate your craft, or rise above mediocrity. What Hill understood, and what modern men ignore, is that the seed is a form of wealth, but instead of investing it, most are spending it recklessly. Look around. Society is designed to keep you in that loop. Lust isn't just a weakness, it's a business model. Billions are made every year off men who can't master their own impulses. Porn platforms, OnlyFans, hypersexualized advertising, none of it exists by accident. It's all engineered to keep your dopamine spiking just enough to keep you addicted, but never long enough to create lasting satisfaction. You become a slave to novelty, a consumer of pleasure, not a wielder of power. The tragic part is that this cycle doesn't just make you weaker, it keeps your potential forever dormant. Because when your sexual energy is constantly discharged, it never has the chance to build pressure. And without pressure, there's nothing to transmute. No empire was ever forged with scattered energy. Picture a young man sitting in a dark room late at night, glowing screen in his face, lost in an endless stream of stimulation. His body is alive, but his purpose is asleep. That's modern masculinity in a nutshell. The energy that could be pushing him toward greatness is being siphoned out through a pixelated fantasy. And every time he gives in, he feels a little more tired, a little less sharp, a little less hungry. It's not just physical exhaustion, it's the dulling of the sword before it ever touches the whetstone. This is the tragedy Hill was trying to wake men up from. Men drown in their own power because they never learned to swim in it. Contrast that with the men who change the world. Thomas Edison was known for his obsessive focus and creative output. Many historians believed he sublimated his sexual energy into his relentless experiments. Henry Ford possessed a ferocious, almost restless drive that built one of the greatest industrial empires the world had seen. Rockefeller, Carnegie, and others lived with a ferocity of intention that couldn't be explained by luck alone. Hill noticed that these men weren't celibate monks. They were disciplined operators. They didn't let desire control their schedule, their emotions, or their mission. They harnessed it. They took the same primal current that makes average men chase pleasure, and they redirected it into conquest, innovation, and influence. And this is where history whispers its harsh truth. Greatness is never random. It's engineered through discipline. Alexander the Great didn't conquer half the known world because he was stronger than everyone. He conquered because he directed every part of himself toward destiny. Julius Caesar wasn't just strategic, he was intoxicating. His charisma was legendary, his will unbreakable. Genghis Khan didn't just rule through fear, he commanded presence like a force of nature. These men understood instinctively what modern men have forgotten. Sexual energy, when mastered, makes a man magnetic, dangerous, and unforgettable. It becomes the undercurrent that sharpens his words, strengthens his will, and drives his legacy forward like a rising tide. You're not lazy, you're hijacked. Every scroll, designed to keep you docile, addicted, and distracted. Dopamine warfare, reclaiming the mind. This isn't just about quitting porn or deleting apps. This is about taking back command of your nervous system, your focus, your fire. Power doesn't come from denial, it comes from redirection. Sexual transmutation isn't about pretending your desires don't exist, it's about forging them into something greater. Napoleon Hill understood this deeply. He wasn't telling men to become monks, he was telling them to become alchemists. In ancient times, alchemists sought to turn base metals into gold. In modern times, the real alchemy is internal, turning lust into legacy, turning raw desire into disciplined force, turning the pull of the flesh into the propulsion of destiny. Most men try to fight lust by suppressing it, and suppression always fails. Pressure builds with nowhere to go, eventually exploding into relapse, frustration, or shame. But transmutation is different. It's not about fighting the current, it's about building channels that direct it toward creation instead of destruction. Sexual transmutation begins with a simple realization. Your desire is energy, not a curse. Energy doesn't disappear, it only changes form. When you feel that intense urge, the rush, the spark, the pull, it's like standing beside a raging furnace. Most men stick their hands into the fire and get burned. The disciplined man builds a forge around it, then uses the flames to sharpen his sword. Hill described this redirection as changing the mind's focus from physical expression to other channels. Think of it as converting kinetic energy into potential power, bottling lightning and using it to light up your empire. This is why Hill found that great men experience their most creative surges after learning to control their sexual urges. Once the energy stopped leaking out through uncontrolled indulgence, it had nowhere to go but upward, into the imagination, into ambition, into creation. But this transformation doesn't happen by accident. It requires discipline, the kind that most men avoid because it demands confrontation with the self. The furnace of discipline is where the seed becomes something new. There are 3 mechanisms every man must master if he's serious about this alchemy. The first is retention and build-up. You have to let the energy accumulate. Just like pressure builds inside a volcano or a dam, sexual energy builds inside a man when it isn't constantly discharged. This is why extended periods of self-control often come with heightened focus, confidence, and even spiritual clarity. The body starts to reroute that energy inward, fueling the nervous system, sharpening instincts, and making the mind more alert. But build-up alone isn't enough. Without direction, pressure becomes chaos. The second mechanism is redirection through mission. Sexual energy needs a target, a battle plan. If you don't give it one, your lower brain will. This is why idle men always end up relapsing. They're sitting on a full tank of jet fuel but have no destination. Your mission is the furnace that gives the energy form. When you immerse yourself in building a business, crafting a skill, mastering your body, or leading a cause, you're giving that primal current something to push. Suddenly, what used to be an urge to escape becomes an urge to build. This is the psychological turning point Hill was pointing toward. Men who transmute their energy become relentless because they've tied their desires to their destiny. Lust stops being a distraction and becomes a weapon. The third mechanism is spiritualization of desire. This is the part most men miss. Sexual energy isn't just physical, it's also emotional and spiritual. Freud saw it as the root of human motivation. Jung viewed it as a potent psychic force that could be transformed into creativity and higher states of consciousness. Hill went further, suggesting that sexual energy, when spiritualized, creates a magnetic field around a man, an aura that enhances his imagination, charm, and ability to influence. This isn't mysticism, it's psychology. When you stop dissipating your energy on fleeting pleasures, that same intensity begins to infuse everything you touch. Your eyes sharpen, your voice carries more weight, your ideas become more vivid. People can feel it before you speak. This is why great men throughout history seem to radiate something different, because they were. Transmutation is like forging steel. Retention builds the heat. Mission shapes the blade. Spiritualization hardens it into something almost unbreakable. Without all three, you either burn out, drift aimlessly, or become spiritually stagnant. This is why so many men who try retention alone eventually fall. They build the pressure, but never learn to channel it. That energy has to move. It wants to move. The key is learning to steer it upward into ambition, art, discipline, and leadership. Hill saw this pattern again and again. Men who once lived ordinary lives suddenly experience surges of creativity, power, and magnetism after mastering this process. What if everything you chase is what's weakening you? What if pleasure isn't reward, but a trap? And what if desire itself was the enemy all along? Death of desire, the Stoics' path to cold clarity. This is not a guide. This is not self-help. This is war. Kill the need, master the mind. When the seed has been preserved and the fire has been forged, something irreversible happens inside a man. His energy no longer leaks out through moments of weakness. It begins to announce him before he even speaks. This is the moment Napoleon Hill was pointing toward when he described sexual transmutation as a defining trait of great men. It's not just about retention, and it's not just about discipline. It's about what happens after the transformation. This is when lust has been alchemized into legacy, when the raw current that once tempted you now works for you, moving silently beneath your ambition like an underground river feeding your empire. This is when the seed becomes the sword. You can spot these men instantly. They don't move fast, they move with intention. Their presence feels heavier, sharper, like a blade tucked beneath a silk cloak. Their eyes don't dart around the room chasing distractions. They observe, they command. Their words don't need to be loud to cut deep. This is the embodied transformation of sexual energy. Retained and redirected desire becomes a magnetic aura, a sharpened will, and a steadiness that unsettles weaker men. People may not understand why they feel it, but they do. It's the energy of a man who has built pressure and learned to wield it, not squander it. Hill described how this mastery enhances imagination, focus, and charisma. But what he didn't romanticize is how it also transforms your daily reality. Women feel it. Men respect it. Opportunities seem to bend toward it, not by magic, but because your entire being is now radiating focused power. Once this energy is under your command, it becomes the foundation for building your inner empire. Sexual transmutation turns desire into an almost inexhaustible fuel source. That same tension that once pulled you toward pleasure now pushes you toward purpose. You start waking up earlier, not because you're forcing yourself to, but because your mind is alive with ideas and ambition. You push harder in the gym, not out of insecurity, but because your body feels like a loaded weapon that demands sharpening. You work longer and smarter because there's an inner current carrying you forward. Hill noticed that most men's lives turn dramatically upward after they learn to control their sexual nature. Promotions, breakthroughs, and creative surges often followed like dominoes falling into place. When you're not constantly fighting your own impulses, your full attention turns outward, toward building. This is the critical shift from consumer to creator. Most men consume pleasure, chasing sensations, chasing validation, chasing release. But when you transmute, you reverse that polarity. You become the source. You create businesses, families, movements, wealth, art, and legacy. The energy that used to be spent in moments is now invested into decades. This is how dynasties are built. This is how timeless works are created. This is how ordinary men carve themselves into history. The sword is symbolic of directed power, sharp, controlled, lethal when necessary. A man who has forged his seed into a sword doesn't waste motion, doesn't apologize for his presence, and doesn't chase things beneath him. He dictates terms to his environment instead of adapting to every temptation it throws at him. But make no mistake, wielding the sword isn't just about external conquest. The greatest battles are internal. The enemy isn't other men. It's your own impulses, your distractions, your lust trying to reclaim the throne. This is why mastery isn't a one-time event. It's a daily war. Hill understood that sexual energy is powerful, but easily misused. One moment of weakness can unravel weeks of pressure, discipline, and momentum. This is why those who truly wield this energy treat it like a sacred weapon. They protect it, respect it, and sharpen it constantly. They build routines that keep them focused, environments that minimize temptation, and missions that keep the fire burning in the right direction. They live like modern-day warriors, not in armor, but with inner vigilance. The modern man is at war, not with kingdoms, but with algorithms, addictions, and soft comforts designed to dull his edge. If you don't wield your energy, the world will weaponize it against you. But when you do take command, the game changes. Your goals stop feeling distant. Your presence stops feeling diluted. Life stops pushing you around because now you're the one with the blade. This is what Hill was revealing beneath his polished language. That the men who rose to power did so because they controlled their most volatile force and turned it into strategic advantage. They learned to use what breaks most men as the very thing that builds their legacy. And that leads us to the final call. You were never meant to scatter your power like crumbs for the world to eat. You were meant to gather it, forge it, and wield it. Thus remember, we are Indecepta. Becoming Indecepta is the code they never wanted you to learn. A psychological war map for men, forbidden teachings fused with modern strategy for influence, dominance, and self-mastery. If you want peace, prepare for war.